Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to a series of videos in which I am reading you a book. We are reading the Gospel according to St. Matthew in the King James translation. And we are up to chapter 17. And after 6 days, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias talking with him. Then answered Peter, and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias. When he spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face, and were sore afraid. And Jesus came and touched them, and said, Arise, and be not afraid. And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no man, save Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, saying, Tell the vision to no man, until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. And as his disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elias must come first? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Elias truly shall come first, and restore all things. But as I say unto you, that Elias is already come, and they knew him not, and have done with him whatsoever they listed. Likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them. Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist. Okay, but the prophecies of Elijah coming back do not resemble John the Baptist at all. Jesus is rewriting things here, or the writer of this gospel is rewriting things, and the writer starts right away by having Jesus transfigured in holy light with Moses and Elijah. So not just an itinerant preacher in the desert at all, but exactly the figure that we saw in the last chapter. Jesus is now saying that he is the fulfillment of Jewish prophecy, that he is the Messiah, and that he is equal to these greatest figures in Jewish mythology. And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him, and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and sore vexed. For ofttimes he falleth into fire, and oft into water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. And Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart, and said, Why could we not cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say to this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. Howbeit this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. A little bit confusing here on a couple of different headings. First of all, this is a holdover from the Gospel of Mark that we saw, which is that Jesus personally is not a very nice person. We've seen already in Matthew that he is bigoted, he's short-tempered, he plays verbal tricks on people who are only meaning good towards him. He's confrontational towards people when he could simply explain himself. And here, a father with an afflicted child comes to him, and he says, Oh God, I'm so sick of all you people. How long will I have to put up with you? Not exactly infinite patience and grace. That's one thing. And another thing is a supernatural claim. We've been watching in our reading of the Gospel supernatural claims. When Jesus makes a supernatural claim, is he right or is he wrong? And most of the supernatural claims that he makes that can be verified are verifiably wrong. He is telling the disciples here that if their faith is true, then it can literally move mountains. He's not talking metaphorically here because he's just used his own superpowers to expel a demon. He is talking about something physical, something real, something that they failed to do in the real, physical, demonstrable world. And he's telling them the reason why they failed is because their faith wasn't great enough. And they're with him every day, living with the Messiah, living with the Christ. So if their faith isn't strong enough, how likely is it that the faith of any other Christian is strong enough? And Christians can't do that. Their prayers cannot move mountains, or, more pointedly, avert famine, or turn the path of a hurricane. Their prayers can't do that. The last thing here, before we move on to the final bit here, is Jesus telling them that this kind, meaning this kind of demon, the kind that he's just expelled, can't be expelled except by prayer and fasting. But he hasn't prayed or fasted. So obviously superpowers can expel this kind of demon, and he has given them superpowers to expel demons. So it's not really clear. It holds over for Mark, but it's still an obscure episode. Then we'll finish up here. No more interruptions to the end here. And while they abode in Galilee, Jesus said unto them, The Son of Man shall be betrayed into the hands of men, and they shall kill him, and on the third day he shall be raised again. And they were exceedingly sorry. And when they came to Capernaum, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, Doth not thy master pay tribute? He saith, Yes. And when he was come into the house, Jesus prevented him, saying, What thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their children, or of strangers? Peter saith unto him, Of strangers. Jesus saith unto them, Then are the children free. Notwithstanding, lest we offend them, go thou to the sea, and cast an hook, and taketh up the fish that first cometh up, and when thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money. That take, and give unto them for me and thee. Okay, so we want, first of all, I want to stress the winningly human detail. Jesus tells the disciples yet again that he will be executed and he will be raised from the dead on the third day. And the very touchingly human detail here is that the disciples are sore afflicted because all they're thinking about is the killing part. They don't have any conception of Jesus coming back from the dead. So all they're mournful when they hear him talk that way because their minds are skipping right over the raised from the dead part. But what about this last bit? This last bit is, again, really strange. When Jesus and disciples go into Capernaum, a tax collector says, Doesn't your master pay taxes? And Peter, not wanting trouble, says, Yes, he does. But when the tax collector comes into the house for the taxes, Jesus essentially says that he does not need to pay taxes, that Christians, what will later become Christians, don't need to pay taxes. But that if it's going to bother you, well, we'll pay something. And then you get this falderall, this ridiculous rigmarole of go and cast a hook into the sea, and the first fish you hook will have a coin inside it that will be enough to cover our whatever we owe this gentleman. Again, that seems to me to be a bit lodged in this chapter from earlier oral or written traditions that doesn't make any sense on its own. However, it is telling. When Jesus does these sorts of things, go into such and such a place and you'll find a man who will lead you to the rooms that are prepared. Go to such and such a place and you will find an ass tied to a tree, and you will use that ass. I will use that ass to enter Jerusalem, and the person who owns it will be perfectly satisfied with the answer that you give me. Here, go and cast your hook into the sea, and the first fish you draw up will have enough coin in it to pay a tax bill. In none of these cases, at none of these times, does Jesus say, when asked, where will we observe the Passover? In none of these stories does Jesus say, right here, and suddenly there's a house around them. In none of these stories, when the disciples say, well, how will you enter Jerusalem, does Jesus say, I will enter on a colt or an ass, and here it is, and it appears out of thin air. And the same thing here. Jesus is not producing money out of thin air. Instead, he's giving this weird choose-your-own-adventure thing for the disciples to do. I think that's fascinating because I think that's also a primeval detail embedded in whatever this narrative went on to become. The character of Jesus at the time when these stories, whatever they were like, wherever this tradition started, we won't go into mythicism here, but whenever this started, the character of Jesus was not able to do unambiguous miracles. A man's son who is afflicted and throws himself into water and into fire, well, is that epilepsy? Is it rabies? Is it therefore that his recovery is natural? Same thing with a woman with a suppurating tumor, or any of the other examples. Is it? It's fungible. It's plastic. Whereas making a donkey out of nothing is not fungible. holding out your hand. You've got loaves and fishes in baskets. Well, how many do you have? How many people are there? Did the story grow in the telling? Was there more food than you thought? Did the people have food? It's fungible. But holding out your hand and saying, my hand is empty, now see it's full of coins, is not fungible. And he doesn't do that. At no point in any of the Gospels does the character of Jesus do that sort of miracle. I just think that's fascinating. That's all. So we're going to move on. There's another short chapter. We're going to move on next time, and I will wrap this up for now and see you then. Thank you, BookTube.